Hello, this is Mike. In this screencast, I want to think about what I call the 6 o'clock stage in the social media planning cycle, selection of tools. When we reach this point in a planning period, we will have listened to what's been said in key social media channels in order to scope out our strategic objectives. We'll have converted those objectives into specific goals and actionables. We will have mapped out a route to achieving those goals, the strategy, and we'll have spent a lot of time getting to know the key segments of our target audience, the types of message they're likely to respond to, and the channels they most commonly frequent. And it's that link from channels to us that is the tools stage. We want to use platforms and styles of message to connect us with the key stakeholders. So this bit is fundamental to everything we do. So in this presentation, I want to briefly talk about three things. What I call permission-based engagement, a change in the way we think about marketing. I want to introduce the big 5 channels that we'll be looking at as elements of this particular course, and some of the ethical considerations that we need to take into account as we use them. So that's the plan. Initially, let's think about marketing. And what I think is going on at the moment is a paradigm shift from push marketing to pull marketing. Let me expand on that a little. The traditional push model of marketing is dependent on what are called interruption strategies. I think the easiest way to picture this is you're sitting watching TV on an evening. It's a commercial TV channel. Halfway through your favorite soap, there's a 2 or 3 minute break in which you get bombarded with TV commercials. That is push marketing. Yeah. A message is being broadcast to a mass audience. Some individuals will be interested, many will not. And it's kind of a scattergun approach that works on the assumption that the message will hit its target in some sectors of the audience. Now, there's a science behind that. We know the demographics that different types of TV programs, such as a soap, typically attract. And that's why advertising is selected accordingly and priced accordingly in terms of connecting organizations with the target segment. So it's not totally scattergun, but it's pretty scattergun. That is the push approach. Marketing messages are being pushed at a mass audience. It's interrupting another activity. Commercial breaks on TV are a good example of that. And the assumption is that for at least a section of the audience, it will hit home because it saves information search activities on the part of the potential customer. So that's push. What we're seeing now is a move to pull marketing. Yeah, it's not mass marketing anymore. It's almost producing a message for a market of one, an audience of one. Consumers are much more active these days. We all have far more choice, the products and services available to us. But equally, through all these different channels, social media and traditional terrestrial, we have more sources of marketing messages. We're much more selective about the marketing we pay attention to than we used to. And so we're active. We actively seek out the information we want. We don't passively sit there absorbing it. Some of which will stick with us and some of which just won't resonate at all. Nowhere can we see this permission-based strategy in action better than in mobile commerce, mobile advertising. Very often you have to opt in to receive services rather than opting out. And so, for example, you may subscribe to a local information service that is dependent on where you are at that particular moment in time. So I'm traveling, I book into a hotel in a strange city, I suddenly start getting presented with marketing messages by my cell phone offering me advice on restaurants, places of interest, taxi services, all in that locality. I opt in, I send a text to give permission to receive content of that type if I think it's useful and I think it adds value to me. So that's a pull approach. I'm getting an initial message, you just arrived in this strange city, but on the whole, I'm choosing to pull particular types of content to me. That's a fundamentally different way of engaging with an organization. And from the organization's point of view, it's a fundamentally different way of doing marketing. The implications of this are quite broad. We now have to work much harder if we remain with push and pull. Consumers are increasingly blind to the types of messages that we are pushing towards them, and they can pull the messages they want. So this permissions-based approach to marketing is really, really important. It makes market segmentation so much more important because we've got to know where to be for the types of customer we want to reach to be pulling our messages to them. So, we have to be much smarter. The upside is it can be more cost effective. We're not engaging in very expensive push mass TV type advertising. We can have more tailored and targeted messages through specific channels that if we get the segmentation and strategy right, will be much more effective for a lot less money. Not always a huge cost saving, but very often a cost saving nonetheless. So we need to make this transition to pull. We need to get into a more conversational style of business so that we can interact with our customer better. We need to have the right channels of communication with them. We need to engage far more. We need to move to being much more active in that communicative approach. A number of authors talk about the different factors involved in achieving permission-based engagement. And one way of grouping these factors is into what are called the PARC factors. The first PARC factor is the need to have a participatory approach to marketing. So the first bit of the transition is the ability to enter communities that are relevant to us and to our target audience, observe the rules and the etiquette, develop trust, and begin to talk to people within those environments, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Google+, whatever. Once we start to provide information, it needs to be authentic information. Social media is all about word of mouth, and it's word of mouth marketing on steroids, as Eric Qualman calls it, because it happens much more rapidly and across a greater spatial and temporal dimension than ever before. So the information has got to be right, it's got to be accurate, it's got to be honest and have integrity. If the information is not authentic, then bad messages are going to spread just as rapidly. And people typically tweet 10 times about a negative experience or message more than they do a positive one. So authenticity is really important. The content of those messages and information needs to be resourceful. It must be disseminated in a way that makes it literally a resource for the recipients. In other words, it needs to be useful content. It needs to be there to provide information, to help a customer or potential customer solve a problem or satisfy a need. It has to have some value. And above all, it needs to be a message delivered by a credible authority. All of the previous factors are pointless if the organization's engagement is not seen as authoritative and credible. So we need to have the right message said by the right type of people through the right channels. So those are the PARC factors. And the PARC factors, all four of them, and all of their subcategories are crucial to making the transition to a pull strategy. We need to participate, provide authentic information, resourceful, i.e. useful content, and do it in a credible and honest way. They're the PARC factors. The channels available to achieve this, there are lots of them, but in social media at the moment, there are what are called the big five, the ones that have the most impact. There's Blogger, the blogging platform. Very, very effective way of engaging in marketing and generally building thought leadership blogging. There are the microblogging platforms such as Twitter. Quick, almost instant messaging, but on a mass scale, connecting people all around the globe on the move. Facebook, an expanded, enhanced version of a microblog. YouTube, our ability to become a broadcaster, not just a publisher of written content, has never been so big. So YouTube is fundamental in all of this too. And LinkedIn, the professional network, a way of engaging with the relevant communities of practice, and in industries such as anywhere in the professional services sector, LinkedIn can be a crucial platform too. These different channels occupy what Tutin and Solomon call 4 specific zones of application. There are channels which are there to develop communities, sharing, socializing, generally engaging in communications. There are those whose primary purpose is publishing. They offer opportunities to deliver editorials, push commercial advertising, and user-generated content of a whole variety of different forms. There are the social entertainment platforms. This zone is all about providing anything from music and video to games, art, you name it. It's entertainment on steroids. And there's the social commerce domain. This is all about engaging in business activity in a more direct way through social media. So this zone can be about internal marketing. It can be about management of HR practices and organizational behavior. It can be about external engagement. It can be developing customer relationships, providing retail or sales channels, facilitating a purchase, and so on. So these are the 4 zones that channels can be used for. And there are a number of common platforms. You see from this very simple schematic that certain platforms occupy more than one zone. Facebook, for example, it's primarily about social community, but it also has a role to play in social commerce. For example, the number of brand sites on Facebook, commercial pages, huge numbers. So different channels can occupy more than one zone of application. So it's not just about choosing the channel, it's figuring out from your segmentation and your strategy development how the channel is going to be utilized and in which particular zone or zones. So zones of social media marketing, very important concept. Before we do any of these things, though, we need to bear in mind the need to be ethical. And really, we touched on this too in the PARC factors. Book suggests there are 5 key elements to being ethical in your social media engagement. And I would encourage you to explore these dimensions more in the literature, the commercial blogs, as well as the academic articles and textbooks that are available. Step 1 is to have a code of practice for those in the organization engaging with the outside world and indeed internally with each other through social media. Don't be unduly restrictive in this. I tend to think that looking at dress codes within organizations is a good starting point for this, because you want to have rules, but they want to be guiding principles rather than every step set in stone, because if you over-regulate, you won't engage in a natural form of conversation. So have a code of practice, a comprehensive one, but loose enough to allow human beings to be human beings and engage with each other. The second step is about having an organizational glossary of terms. Different people in an organization will be speaking to key stakeholders through different social media channels, sometimes several people through the same channel. So you need a common voice, certain approved terms, ways of describing things, a corporate style guide, if you like. You need to have central registration of the formal accounts while encouraging personal networking. If someone leaves, for example, you want to retain a lot of the network. So manage the accounts in a corporate way, even for individuals. Look at TV as an example. If you look at the news or the weather forecast, you'll see that most of the presenters and reporters have a Twitter channel, for example. There'll be a certain style about them which reflects the fact that they're corporate in nature. I was watching a weather forecast before recording this on ITV, the TV network in the UK. It was from Lucy Verasamy, and she put up her Twitter handle, Lucy Weather. So very corporate and centrally registered. Next step, establishing a team to own social media. And it needs to be cross-functional. This is not the time for a territorial approach. It is not the domain just of marketing. Social media policies need to be produced and managed across the organization if the whole organization is going to be using it. And so it needs to be multifunctional, interdisciplinary, all different perspectives being considered. And ultimately, social media monitoring needs to be put in place. Go for a particular tool, perhaps. It might be internal, it might be external. Have a particular training program for those owning social media to go through so that everyone's using the tool in the same way, but do not begin implementation without monitoring being in place first, so that all of these messages are being monitored, their reaction from the target audience captured, and if a mistake happens, something is perhaps not as ethical as when it first appeared, that'll be detected and the strategy can be revised accordingly. So, those are just a few thoughts from me on the basic rules of engagement. We need to remember that marketing has moved from push to pull, and it's all about permission-based engagement. The customer lets us talk to them. We can do so through a whole range of channels. I've just highlighted 5 of them, but there are many, many more. Whichever we use, and however we go about this permission-based engagement, we need to think ethically. We need clear rules and guidelines without being too restrictive. Thank you.